Listen closely, child of the present hour, for what I tell you is not carved in stone, yet it lingers in the winds like a song half remembered. There was once a tower, tall and proud, its shadow cutting into the sky like a blade of iron. The people of the city knew it only as the Doom Tower. None could agree on who had built it, or why it remained empty while all around it, life went on. Its windows were black eyes, unblinking, watching the world below. But whispers traveled. They said the tower had not always been silent. They said once, behind its sealed doors, something had stirred. Men and women with minds full of ambition had filled its halls with experiments not meant for mortal hands. Some said it was science, others said sorcery, and some believed it was something deeper. The arrogance of humankind seeking to master the unseen threads of fate. This is not the story of the tower alone, my friend. It is the story of those who wandered too close to its shadow, of love kindled and tested, of hope that refused to die. For within the tale of the Doom Tower lies a truth as ancient as breath, that even in the darkest halls, the human heart can become a lantern. There was a young man named Elias, quiet by nature, yet with a soul restless as the tide. He was not born to greatness. He worked with books in the library at the city's edge, his days filled with dust and forgotten pages. But Elias carried a question within him, one that throbbed like a heartbeat every night when he closed his eyes. Why does the tower call to me? From his window he could see its jagged form against the horizon. No matter how much the city tried to ignore it, the tower always rose above their lives, like a reminder of something unfinished. And Elias, though he told no one, dreamed of it. He dreamed of walking its stairways, hearing whispers in the dark, feeling unseen eyes watch him. The dreams were not nightmares. No, they felt like invitations. And in those dreams, there was always a voice. Soft, like the rustle of silk, yet filled with sorrow. The voice never spoke words he could remember upon waking. It was more like a melody that haunted him. Then, one autumn evening, when the air smelled of wood smoke and rain, Elias met Mira. She was unlike anyone he had known. Where Elias was quiet, Mira was alive with unspoken fire. Her hair, dark as the night sky, fell loosely around her shoulders, and her eyes seemed always to be listening to some secret the rest of the world could not hear. She was a traveler, she said, though she did not say from where. She wandered into the library as though she had been searching for something among its rows of silent knowledge. "Do you ever feel," she asked Elias, her voice calm yet piercing, "that some places are alive? That they remember, and they wait for us?" Elias felt his breath catch. She had spoken the thought he had never dared voice aloud. And in that moment he knew. She, too, felt the pull of the Doom Tower. They began to speak often, their conversations weaving late into the night. Mira carried stories from places Elias had only read about, mountains where the clouds touched the earth, oceans that roared like lions, deserts that whispered under the stars. But whenever she spoke of the tower, her tone changed. She said she had dreamt of it long before she ever came to the city. And in her dream, she was not alone. Someone was trapped within. Elias confessed his own dreams. Mira did not laugh, nor did she recoil. Instead, she placed her hand gently on his, and her eyes shone with a deep sadness. "Perhaps," she said, "our dreams are not ours alone. Perhaps they are memories trying to find us." The days passed, and the city grew colder as winter approached. Yet Elias's life warmed in ways he had never imagined. Mira's presence was like a flame in a darkened room. She carried no family, no past she wished to speak of, but she carried belief, a belief that life was full of hidden doors, and that some were meant to be opened even if they led to fear. One evening, snowflakes drifting softly outside, Mira told Elias the truth of why she had come. "I have followed the tower," she whispered. "In every city I have lived, I heard the same story, of people vanishing into its depths, of lights flickering in windows long abandoned, of experiments that sought to touch the soul itself. I believe someone remains within, lost, waiting to be freed." Her words chilled Elias, and yet his heart stirred. For he too had felt that someone lingered in the shadows of his dreams, their sorrow calling to him. Together, they resolved to go. not as reckless seekers of danger, but as souls who felt chosen by something beyond their comprehension. The night they chose was clouded, the moon veiled in silver mist. They walked through the sleeping streets, the silence heavy with expectation. As they neared the tower, the air grew colder, as though the building exhaled frost. The great iron gates, rusted and chained, stood before them. But when Mira laid her hand upon them, the chains fell away as if they had never been. Elias felt the world tilt, as though they had already crossed into a place where ordinary rules no longer applied. Inside, the tower was not empty. No, my dear listener, it was full. Full of echoes, full of shadows, full of the weight of what had once been. The air smelled of stone and old sorrow. The walls bore symbols faintly etched, pulsing with a light too dim to be natural. And always, always, there was the sound of dripping water, steady as a heartbeat. They climbed stair after stair, their footsteps ringing. At times, Elias swore he heard whispers like threads of thought brushing against his mind. Mira, too, paused often, her face pale but resolute. At last, they reached a great chamber. The floor was covered in dust, but at its center stood a circle, carved into the stone, marked with strange devices, half machine, half living veins of metal. And there, within the circle, was a chair. No, not a chair. A throne. And upon it, slumped as if asleep, was a figure. The figure was draped in tattered cloth, the face obscured by shadows. But even in stillness, Elias felt the weight of its presence, like standing before the remains of a king who had not yet released his crown. Mira trembled, her voice breaking into the silence. This is who I have seen. Trapped, waiting. And then, the figure stirred. Slowly, painfully, its head lifted. The shadows parted to reveal eyes that glowed faintly with light not of this earth. And when it spoke, its voice was the voice Elias had heard in his dreams, the sorrowful melody. "You should not have come," it whispered. "The tower remembers. The tower never forgets." Elias's heart pounded, yet something in him refused to step back. He felt a connection to this figure, as though part of his soul had always belonged here. "Who are you?" Elias asked, his voice shaking. The figure's eyes burned brighter, and for a moment Elias thought he saw a flicker of humanity beneath the weariness. "I am what remains," the figure murmured. "Once, I was like you. Once, I loved. Once, I believed. But the experiments, the experiments, tore me apart. They sought to unravel the thread between body and spirit, to command the soul itself. And now I am neither living nor gone. I am memory bound to stone. I am the whisper that calls the dreamers here." Mira's hand clutched Elias's, her eyes wide with tears. "Then let us help you," she pleaded. "Let us set you free." The figure's gaze fell upon her, and a strange tenderness flickered in its eyes. "Freedom," it said softly. "Yes, but freedom is never without cost." And so, my dear listener, the night deepened, and the hearts of Elias and Mira were pulled into a story older and darker than they had known. They had crossed the threshold, and there would be no turning back. The tower had awakened. Its experiments were not finished, and the forgotten soul within had chosen them, whether for salvation or for sacrifice. But even then, in the midst of dread, there was love. A bond forming between two dreamers who had found in each other the courage to face the unknown. And though shadows whispered all around them, Elias knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would test every thread of their hearts. For the Doom Tower remembers, and what it remembers, it does not release easily. The chamber was silent after the figure's words, yet Elias could feel the air vibrating with unseen tension, as if the walls themselves waited for his response. He and Mira stood close, hands still clasped, while the figure's eyes burned like dying stars. Freedom, cost, sacrifice. These words hung heavy, pressing into the marrow of their bones. "Tell us what we must do," Elias whispered at last, his voice steadier than he felt. The figure leaned forward, every movement slow, burdened, like centuries weighed upon its limbs. "The experiments carved me from myself," it said, its voice trembling with both sorrow and rage. "They tried to split the soul, to bind memory and will into stone, to command the essence that makes us human. They succeeded. Too well. Now I am bound to this tower, and the tower is bound to me. To free me is to unravel that bond. But when the bond breaks, something must fill the emptiness." Mira's brow furrowed, her breath sharp. Something? Or someone? The figure's silence was its answer. Elias felt a chill flood him, but Mira's hand tightened around his, grounding him. He looked into her eyes and saw no fear there, only resolve, and a depth of compassion that made his chest ache. "Why us?" Elias asked softly. "Why call to us, of all people?" The figure's eyes softened. "Because you listen. The world is full of noise, of lives rushing and hearts closing. But you, both of you, you hear the whispers. You feel what others ignore. The tower called and you came. Perhaps love brought you as well. That is why I waited. That is why you are here. Love." The word fell like a spark into the chamber's cold air. Elias glanced at Mira, and in her gaze he saw the truth. Yes, love had brought them here, new and fragile, yet fierce enough to pull them into the heart of mystery. The days that followed blurred into nights within the tower. They did not leave. It was as if the world beyond had dissolved, as though time itself bent around these walls. Elias and Mira wandered through rooms filled with strange devices, journals half burned, symbols etched into stone that pulsed faintly like veins beneath skin. Each step seemed to draw them deeper into the story of what had once happened here. They found fragments of the old scientist's writings, dreams of conquering death, of transferring consciousness, of bridging the seen and unseen. Some pages spoke of hope, others of madness. And everywhere, they felt the figure's presence. Sometimes he spoke with them, sometimes he vanished into silence, fading like smoke. Elias sensed his sorrow most of all, the sorrow of one who had once been human, who had loved and who had been betrayed by the very dream he trusted. Yet amid this weight of despair, Elias and Mira's bond grew. They shared whispered words in the dim light, comforted each other when the whispers grew too strong. Mira, who had walked alone for so long, found solace in Elias's steady presence. And Elias, who had once only watched the world from the shadows of books, felt for the first time the fire of destiny in his veins. One night, as they sat together in the great chamber, Mira rested her head on Elias's shoulder. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "if we were meant to find each other? Not by chance, but by some thread. The same thread that led us here?" Elias brushed a strand of her hair back, his heart swelling. "I don't just wonder," he whispered. "I believe it. Whatever waits ahead, Mira, I believe we were meant to face it together." Her hand found his, and for a moment the tower felt less cold. But fate, child, is not without its trials. The closer they came to the truth, the heavier the burden grew. The figure's health, or whatever state of being it possessed, was failing. His glow dimmed, his voice cracked like breaking glass. "The bond phrase," he told them one night, his form trembling. "The experiments unravel as the years weigh down. Soon the tower will collapse inward. If I am not freed, everything within these walls, memory, soul, all, will be lost." "And if you are freed?" Elias asked. "Then one of you must stay," the figure said, his gaze like a mirror of sorrow. "One of you must anchor the unraveling, or else the collapse will consume the city itself. The tower is not just stone, it is a vessel. It must hold a soul." The words struck like a blade. Elias felt the world tilt, his mind racing. He looked to Mira, who met his gaze with steady, burning eyes. There was no fear there, only love, and a readiness he could scarcely comprehend. "No," Elias said fiercely. "We'll find another way. There must be another way." But the figure shook his head slowly. "Hope is a lantern, but sometimes its flame requires sacrifice." The days that followed were heavy with unspoken thoughts. Elias wrestled with himself, pacing the echoing halls, trying to decipher runes, searching the journals for another answer. He could not bear the thought of losing Mira. The very idea hollowed him out. Yet Mira seemed at peace. She smiled softly, walked beside him, listened to his words even as his voice cracked with desperation. One night, when he could no longer bear the silence, Elias cried out, "Why are you so calm? Do you not see what this means? One of us won't leave this place." Mira touched his cheek gently, her eyes luminous with tears. "Elias," she whispered, "all my life, I have wandered, searching for something I could not name. And now I know. It was you. It was this. If the cost of freeing what has been bound is my soul, then it is a cost I can bear. Because love does not cling to life. Love gives itself away." Her words shattered him and healed him all at once. He wept into her shoulder, clutching her as though his arms could hold back fate itself. And Mira held him, her hand stroking his hair, whispering that even if the tower claimed her, her love would never fade. The night of choice came at last. The figure summoned them to the chamber once more. The circle on the floor glowed with searing light, the devices humming like a heartbeat awakening. The air was electric, alive, trembling with power older than the stones themselves. "This is the moment," the figure said, his form flickering. "One of you must sit in the circle. One must become the anchor. The other will walk free, carrying the memory forward." Elias turned to Mira, his heart breaking. "No," he whispered. "I can't let you do this. I won't." Mira smiled, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "Then we decide together." She stepped into the circle first, but Elias rushed forward, pulling her back. "If anyone stays, it's me," he said fiercely. "You have seen the world, Mira. You carry the stories of mountains, seas, and deserts. You carry light. I cannot let that vanish. Let me be the one." But Mira shook her head, her hands gripping his. "Elias, you are the one who listens. You are the one who carries hope even when shadows surround you. You must live, because the world needs souls like yours." The figure's voice broke through, low and sorrowful. "The choice is yours. But know this. Whoever stays will not vanish. They will become part of the tower's memory, woven into its walls, whispering forever. Their love will remain, but their form will fade." And so, my dear listener, the choice was made, not with words, but with action. For as Elias turned to plead again, Mira pressed her lips to his in one final kiss, fierce and tender. And as he gasped, she pulled away and stepped into the circle, her body illuminated by the rising light. "Mira!" Elias cried, rushing forward, but an invisible force held him back, as though the tower itself restrained him. He screamed her name, his heart tearing in two, but Mira only smiled through her tears. "Remember me," she whispered, her voice carried like music. "Carry my love into the world. That is all I ask." The light grew blinding. Elias fell to his knees, sobbing, as the figure's form dissolved into mist, freed at last. Mira's body glowed, her outline trembling, until she was no longer flesh, but light itself, pouring into the walls, the stones, the heart of the tower. And then, silence. The circle dimmed, the throne was empty, and the tower was at peace. Elias stumbled out at dawn. The chains upon the gate had returned, yet they opened for him as if moved by unseen hands. The city was unchanged, the world moving as though nothing had happened. But Elias, he was changed forever. He carried Mira's memory within him, not as grief alone, but as a lantern. Everywhere he walked, he felt her presence in the wind, the stars, the quiet moments of stillness. And though his heart ached, it also swelled, for he knew her sacrifice was not an ending, but a transformation. The Doom Tower still stands, though its shadow feels gentler now. They call it cursed, haunted, forgotten. But Elias knows better. When the wind blows against its stones, he hears her voice, soft, steady, eternal. And when he closes his eyes, he whispers back, "I remember. Always." So, child, remember this. Love is not measured by how long it lasts, but by how deeply it transforms us. The world is filled with towers, of fear, of sorrow, of trials we do not understand. But within each, there is a choice, to cling to life alone or to give ourselves to something greater. Mira chose love. Elias chose remembrance. And through them, we are reminded that even in the darkest halls, the human heart can become a lantern that never fades. And so I leave you with this truth, etched in timeless light. When love gives itself away, it is never lost. It becomes the whisper in the stones, the song in the wind, the flame that guides others home.